Hi, folks. This is a tarot reading for Scorpio, Ascendant, Sun, and Moon for December 2018. And so I'm going to dive right into it here. Um, just a quick word on the spread. It's the Gemini Astrological Tarot spread that I've been using for all my readings this month for signs and whatnot. Scorpio, you're going to be right here. This is your ascendant. This is always where Scorpio is within this spread. It never changes. And then we'll be moving clockwise around in the order of the astrological houses and signs. And we've got the 13th card here, which is kind of a summation of the entire spread, the underlying sort of thread or component that runs through it all. And so, yeah, we're just going to jump right in and see what we can find. First, let's do a little overview, which is something I sometimes forget to do, but it's good to do it. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 major arcana. So there's definitely, some powerful energies at work for you, some changes happening. It's not the most major arcana that could have come up, but you've got your ascendant as a major arcana and the underlying thread card. So that's very significant. That kind of empowers this theme of powerful energies and the potential for some big changes to be coming if the rest of the spread is supportive of that. Let's see what else we've got. We've got 1, 2, it looks like 2 wands cards. So not a lot of wands cards. We don't have, oh no, we have everything. Yeah, we've got 1 cups card. We have 1, 2 swords card, 3 swords cards. So 3 swords card, and then 1, 2, 3 pentacles. 1, 2, 3 pentacles. And I would say, in a sense, the pentacles are maybe a tad bit more prominent than the swords cards, because I usually don't give as much prominence to the court cards for the suite myself. But that's just sort of my own personal approach. So we've got kind of a balance between like worldly affairs and money versus, swords, which is generally speaking kind of like trials and tribulations, but it's also esoterically the intellect, the element air. So we got kind of an even thing going on between those. And then we've got only 2 wands cards, only 1 cups card. So we've got a little less happening with regard to personal empowerment, and yet even a little less happening with emotional stuff. So that'll be interesting to see how that sort of plays out. But interestingly enough, we do have some watery cards sort of by default. Aside from the cups card, right, the high priestess is definitely very watery, lunar. Star is, of course, extremely watery. And this card is watery as well, for the obvious reason that they're on a little boat crossing some kind of river or it's probably a river or a lake, So we got some watery stuff happening there. And this is going to be, I think, a really interesting one to interpret. So let's get to it. Let's start with your ascendant, which is where you're going to be most directly involved in, and that sort of a thing. I think I see you as, being really empowered for sure this month to do whatever it is you want to do. You are stepping out of your comfort zone. You are traversing new terrain in a big way, stepping up to the plate. And, if anyone tries to mess with you, they're not really going to like it, and so on. You're influenced by the 9 of wands, which is interesting because that's a card of trepidation and sort of caution, planning. So you have all this power and stuff, but you are perhaps not quite sure how to go about using it. You have the star card aspecting, which suggests that you want things to be in alignment with the cosmos. You want to do things right, actually. Scorpio gets such a bad rap for, being problematic and vicious and revengeful and out for itself. But that's really, that can be very true, but that is not the essence of the sign Scorpio. The essence of the sign Scorpio is merely that Scorpio intimately feels the hidden energies of the universe coursing through everything, including themselves. And so they are drawn to power. It's this serpent power, which can either kill or cure, right? Serpent medicine is a very powerful emblem of healing, right? Because serpents are so venomous, but you can heal with a serpent's venom. Sorry, to make an anti-venom, you use the serpent's venom, right? To make an anti-venom for that venom. So Scorpios are all about power, but but that has nothing to do with power over others. That has to do with basically just being in touch with the primal energies in a positive, healthy way. And because our culture misunderstands sex and primal energies so heavily in this day and age, and actually throughout history, if you look at it, or at least the past couple thousand years in most cultures, it seems like, but especially in the West, Scorpio has been largely misunderstood and has misunderstood themselves. So that's just a little bit of an aside, because again, this is a very empowering thing. And, I love how the chariot has the moon shoulder pads and has the stars, the starry banner, and then we've got the star aspecting. So they are also both 7. The star is 17 and the chariot is 7. So they both are related to the number 7. They're actually 2 halves of a whole, in a sense. This is the yang half of 7. This is the yin half. And 7 has it is the number of destiny. It is the number of reaching beyond oneself and into the void, into the domain of the unknown. And so we really have a positive indication for that for you this month, reaching into the unknown and sort of becoming really who you are, harmonizing the outer and inner very fluidly and easily. There's really not much blocking you from doing that, except perhaps the High Priestess card, which I'll talk about later. And again, this sort of trepidation around it. What is with this trepidation, right? Well, he's avoiding some kind of major, not conflict, but major upheaval, right? Major crisis. And he's thinking about some sort of familial thing. This is going to be the 8th house for Scorpio. So we'll kind of come back to that, I think. But this trepidation and the things that are on either side of it are going to be potential barriers for you forging ahead. Fortunately, I don't think enough to really deter you too much this month, but it is something to keep in mind in case, especially if that's directly relevant in your life right now, when we get to these cards more in depth. I love that the 6 of Pentacles is aspecting the chariot as well, because it reinforces this theme of really doing the right thing and using one's power to help others less fortunate, to uphold the law, to uphold truth, to bring balance. So and Scorpio, being the natural 8th sign, is really, in a way, it's like it's part of that karmic balancing that happens, where in Aries or the 1st house we act, and then when we get to Libra, the 7th, we see what our actions have led us to. But in Scorpio, it's kind of like, what do we do with the result of our actions? Because there's power that's released from that thesis antithesis kind of thing. And so Scorpio is that 8th house, is that state of like pause and like, what do we do with this power? What do we really do with it? Do we hoard it for ourselves? Do we resist it and sort of perish? Or do we let it transform us into something greater so that we can get to the 9th house, which will inevitably, if all goes well, so to speak, it'll help us to basically, actually be transformed and emerge from the transformational process or experience and kind of do what's right, so to speak. So this is your 6th house, which has to do with service and illnesses and the downtrodden. So this card couldn't be in a better place for signifying like helping the poor and the downtrodden and stuff like that. So it's really a beautiful thing we're seeing here with Scorpio, which gets such a bad rap. I don't know what that's all about, but yeah, I think this is really a wonderful situation happening for you overall. Okay, so let's see where to go next from this. Well, something I forgot to mention is that we have 2 6s, which is interesting. So those are going to be related to each other, even though they're not an aspect. And then we have 3 nines. We have 3 out of 4 nines, which is really amazing. No major arcanum that are nines, but yeah, wow, 3 out of the 4 suites, the 9th card. And 9 is really a powerful card of spiritual crisis and or supreme completion and fulfillment. We get more of the fulfillment with the cups and the pentacles card, whereas we get more the spiritual crisis with the wands and the swords card version of the 9. So yeah, that's an additional theme that we'll sort of consider and think about. Now, I said that maybe the High Priestess was the only major obstacle that I could see, at least right now, to fulfilling this destiny, this calling that you have this month. And I'm not sure how that plays out just yet. I'm just not sure. It's sort of something I intuitively am feeling about it. Partly because it's reversed, but partly because the High Priestess is so stationary, whereas the Chariot is mobile in motion. And so, in a sense, like in your, deep under everything you're doing this month, there may be this pull towards the past, that kind of a thing. Excuse me. There may be this pull towards the past, this pull towards a state of inactivity. You may feel like you don't know enough or something, or that you feel like you need some sort of approval to be doing what you're doing. But the Chariot doesn't need approval. Not really. I mean, the Chariot is doing what he needs to do, not only for the greater good, but to actualize his own destiny. So in that sense, the High Priestess is kind of antithetical to this kind of movement. 2 and 7 are kind of odd bedfellows. So I think that's what I was picking up on. Okay, so I spent quite a lot of time on that stuff. Let's move to the second house here, which has to do with, again, family and wealth, or money, generally speaking. There's a transition for you happening in terms of your family life, I think. There's definitely a transition happening. You're making some kind of a change. This is kind of if we think about the 5 of Swords, for those of you who know that card, if I can find it real quick, I will as I talk. But there was kind of some sort of falling out in the 5 of Swords, and then the 6 is people sort of like remorsefully moving on from whatever that was. Yeah, here's the 5 of Swords, right? He's kind of remorsefully picking up after a mess, and maybe those people walking away are some of the people on the boat in the 6 of the 6 there, 6 of Swords. I don't know, but yeah, there's some sort of transition happening there. This isn't necessarily great for finances, I won't lie. It's very transitional period for both family and financial stuff. And the fact that the 8th house contains such an abundant Pentacles card, it's showing that, the other people in your life are kind of the ones that have money, or if something is happening with a partnership or relationship or whatever, which is the 7th house here, this is their second house. They kind of have more of the money, more of the power, and perhaps more the praise of the family too. This could easily be like a situation where, like, a sibling or somebody like that is sort of favored and sort of given like more praise or something like that. I'm not sure really, but that kind of comes to mind. And so with this card in the 8th house, this is kind of what you're venturing towards in terms of finances and family. You're trying to venture towards this, but it's sort of far away, it's removed, and it's maybe a drain upon you. You may just feel like, how am I supposed to get money and stuff? Like, how am I going to do that? And, it's just a deeply transitional time for finances. I don't know how major of a theme that is here, really, because you also have, this card is auspicious, and you also have this wonderful 9 of Pentacles in juxtaposition to the 10, right? And, sometimes we think, oh, well, like the the 10 is better than the 9 or something. But it's not really like that in tarot. It's not that linear, in my opinion. There is a progression, but it's not always linear. And so the 9 of Pentacles refers to being like supremely satisfied with like what you have and what you've created, and realizing the abundance of spirit in matter. So the 9 of Pentacles, in my experiences, is one of the most profoundly spiritual cards out there. And it's interesting because, these two cards are in aspect, and this card is, and then these two cards, the four corners are all aspecting each other, right? So what does that really mean? Well, this is the most powerful aspect for this one. This is what he's trying to head towards, in a sense. But with this one, this is like an alternate way of going, sort of going it alone, instead of worrying about like your family, or worrying about like what everyone else thinks, or trying to build some sort of like grand legacy. Don't don't worry so much about building some grand legacy. Like concern yourself more with just communing with what is already there, like realizing the plenitude and the abundance that already exists in the natural world, and then you just tap into it. So don't worry about this far off sort of future stuff, like what am I going to do when I'm old, this old man here, and themes like this, or oh, these other people look so happy, I wish I could be like them. Or maybe maybe you recently lost an animal or something, and you're mournful over that. Don't let that stuff take its own course. It's not something you need to like overly concern yourself with. Don't suppress it, of course, but it's not really going to serve you. The 9 of Pentacles is here in the 5th house, also again aspected by the extremely auspicious 9 of Cups. So this is like deeply fulfilling stuff if you just sort of follow your own creative muse and do the things that are going to come from independence and confidence and power and so on, which you have a lot of here in this spread. Also very auspicious for children. If you have any children, or if you work with children and things like that, this is just very auspicious scenario for children. And so I recommend, if they're young and stuff, maybe keep them out of any sort of like, don't ruin what they have with like the woes of, what else is going on financially or familially. It's a good place to emphasize like the things that are already there that are wonderful and so on. Okay, so I said stuff about a sibling earlier being favored, but I mean, I that was kind of like very very theoretical, because honestly, like the 3rd house of siblings, if you have a sibling, you guys are going to do good things together. You're going to support each other and that sort of a thing. Your siblings, or this can also be neighbors or acquaintances and things like that, could also be sort of struggling. They have the aspect of the Tower. They have the aspect of the 6 of Wands. So there's kind of a bit of a struggle there for them. So this is somebody or something you want to really support and be supportive of. On another level, it's our own like efforts and things like that, like overcoming obstacles. And it also has to do with like our daily spirituality. So like our daily, like the way we integrate spiritual teachings of the 9th house over here into our daily lives. And it also is going to have to do with like leisures and entertainments. And so I'm kind of seeing this is like a strong break from whatever like entertaining or leisurely activities you've been pursuing to take care of more pressing matters, so to speak. It is a very sensitive card in a way too. So you may be overly sensitive in your everyday environment to whatever kind of challenges are coming. It's not really a great card for overcoming obstacles in that sense. So there's kind of that theme. This card in the 9th is kind of like really reconsidering what you believed and like what you thought was right and so on. And that really goes well with the theme of the Chariot as well. And so in the 3rd house, it's kind of like you thought and believed these things about, let's say, God. But in the 3rd house, you're in a place where you're maybe You're maybe just naturally like letting those things go and exploring spirituality for yourself instead of just listening to a tradition or a teacher or a book or a priest or something like that. So you have a lot more auspiciousness for exploring spirituality for yourself and that kind of a thing. Fourth house is the Knight of Swords, and he's rushing towards the star. Does he think he has to save this person? Right? This person does not need saving, but perhaps this character thinks he needs to save them. So this could, on a mundane level, mean a mother or father figure running towards a sibling, maybe a sister or something like that. It's a feminine card again. So, but trying to, quote unquote, save them. Very odd. Very, very not. This is not a great combination. I won't lie. For you, this is your fourth house, right? Again, this is your home, your private life, and so on. And so, I'm not sure really what this is. Very odd. It's very much could be a perturbed state of mind over the changes that are happening in your life, as described earlier, back to the Chariot and whatnot. Kind of a perturbed state of mind, and so it's almost like maybe there will be a tendency to emotionally flee into something that's comfortable. And this is where the star could take on a different meaning as like fleeing into, I don't know, like almost like you're like trying to stop yourself or others from having fun, or you're like trying to win back a past love, or you're escape into um trying to escape into nature, which isn't like a bad thing, but if you do anything too much, it becomes unhealthy, right? So on some level, you're like running away from something, and maybe what you're running away from is this like sense of beauty and fulfillment that you already have, kind of a thing, and you're sort of like running back into a crisis or a state of this could even be running back into like a victim mentality negatively, right? So we don't want to see that happening if we can avoid it. We want to see empowerment and plenitude. And so anything you can do to encourage in your own life that plenitude that's already there and that peace and whatnot, I think is going to be important. Knight of Swords is aspected by Nine of Wands, Six of Cups, and Page of Swords. Kind of an odd smattering of characters there, for sure. On some level, this could be saying like you are aware of this sort of habit that you have of like running all over the place and not having too much peace of mind, right? You're sort of aware of that. This urge to like help others and stuff could be contributing kind of a little dysfunctionally to this. And the Page of Swords, well, it's in the 12th house for you, so that is dealing with loss and regret and letting go. And I don't know. I think it would signify that your actions in this regard are influenced by something that happened in your childhood or something like that. Or perhaps there's like a jealous individual jealous of this happiness and abundance. So kind of a jealous individual or something like that. That's sort of maybe your friend, maybe not, but they're kind of working behind your back. We'll talk more about the 12th house kind of when we get to it, I guess, more properly. Moving on, we've already talked about like these two, so I'm going to skip over them. Seventh house is very interesting. Seventh house is very interesting. It's certainly not much romantically happening here. If you are in a relationship or something, this could easily be like, I don't know, your partner could potentially interfere with this scenario. These cards don't really, they're both sixes. Oh, we have 3 6s. Oh, wow. Oops. Okay, so we have 3 6s and 3 9s. Sorry, that really says something. And 6s are broadly speaking about like, they're kind of cards of like pleasure. I know in the rider-waite it's not as like pleasurable looking, but they're pleasure and a certain amount of power coming along with them, whereas the nines are more like crisis and fulfillment. So there's a transition for sure between like doing what's pleasurable and doing what's really spiritually fulfilling, because six is only 3 times 2, right? And if we take a triangle and make each point 3, then we have the fullness of 9. So 6 is only a partial fullness. It's only a fleeting sort of pleasure and that thing. So there's a transition emphasized between fleeting pleasures or less permanent pleasures and like more permanent, lasting abundance and spiritual wisdom. I know that is kind of broad, that kind of just like fits into here vaguely, but um, the Hermit is actually the ninth arcanum, and he is kind of linked to the Priestess loosely. And so it's sort of like the Hermit, if the Hermit was here, he's here in spirit because of the nines, but it's kind of like the Hermit realizes that the Priestess, the teachings that she holds in her hands were like there all along, so there wasn't a need to look for it. So in a sense, maybe the sixes are representing like an ambition to find fulfillment in less lasting ways, more temporal ways. Because feeding the poor, you're not going to like solve world hunger by just feeding the poor, right? You're not going to solve your self-esteem issues and your individualism question by praise of others, which is very much this card. And you're not going to solve your challenges and sort of intellectual questions by just running to another place, so to speak. Instead, you're going to solve these things by basically extreme independence. The nines are all there's only one person in the 9 card. You have to go within. The 6 cards, there's always other people. And even in the 6 of cups, yeah, there's other people in it. So that's really important. I missed that and I apologize, but that's really powerful stuff. So I think that this is sort of like, it may not be a partner. It may just be because the 7th house is like those desires that are pulling us out into the world. Again, a strong desire to go to this, right? Very strong desire to go to this. This is a sort of a strong desire to go to this, right? And so we just have these like more temporal desires pulling us strongly towards these less fulfilling states. And the 10 isn't necessarily a less fulfilling state, but it's sort of further off in the future. Right? But in the 9th house, you're contemplating if this really is what you want, if this really is important. You're very actually, even though wands are not super objective, the 9 of wands in this deck is more objective. It's more realizing about like what your actions and thoughts and things have resulted in, right? So I think that's more what that stands for and whatnot. I'm not really seeing it so much as like another person in your life, a partnership. There's really not much romance here. There might be like trying to get back with an old fling or something, but it's not really, that's very unlikely to work out. The swords surrounding the star, there's meddling, instead of just paying attention to the beautiful messages and wisdom that reside in everyday life, there's some potential tampering with it. So I encourage you to be aware of that and see if you can not tamper or tamper less in your daily affairs and just let them unfold. This card is aspected by, the 9. Again, this is the part of you that's wondering, is this really what I want? Do I really want to be like, just, can I really find fulfillment helping the poor and being popular or something like that? The Page of Swords, again, it's like wanting something for the sake of wanting it, so to speak. The Page of Swords is not a desirous card, but it is a card that can symbolize like plotting, I guess you could say, like conniving, plotting, scheming, that kind of a thing. How do I get this? Or this could again be a person that's trying to like push you off that horse from behind your back. And then the star aspecting it, which is sort of linking it to your hopes and dreams. It's almost like the star card is like what's in this wreath, right? So you're going on this sort of crusade to do something really great that you believe in, you know, chariot, star, and this guy over here on the horse, and even the knight of swords, and this card, they're all kind of like in a crusading spirit. So I don't think this is like bad, right? I don't think this is bad or anything. I think it's really noble that perhaps you want to do something for the greater good, right? It's just that you have to acknowledge that this is potentially just a stepping stone. This isn't the full picture, right? You're not going to solve world hunger by feeding the poor. And why are you even trying to solve world hunger, right? Abundance is already here if we realize the perfection and unity of spirit and matter kind of thing. And I know that sounds esoteric. I'm not saying don't help the poor or helping the poor is bad. And I'm certainly not saying that, like, if you alone realize the prior unity and abundance that exists, that somehow that's going to solve world hunger overnight and negate, you know, the charitable actions of others. Not saying that at all. I'm just saying that there's clearly this theme here of more temporary fulfillment in destiny and more long-term fulfillment in destiny, and you're contemplating that really deeply. That's causing a sort of a rift in you, I think, and that's why the tower is here upside down, because that's the two sides of what you could do in a sense. The tower is in your 10th house of actions and career. And so you feel pulled in two directions, and it's almost like you're very much afraid to act with these two cards the way they are. You're very much afraid to take that step forward because you know that on some level you're going to have to make some sacrifices, and you're going to have to tear yourself away from your life as it is now. That's okay. The cool thing is if you actually go through this crisis, whatever crisis it is, the 11th house of gains is very, very auspicious, and it's aspected by two very auspicious cards. And this third card, you know, not necessarily as auspicious, but it's kind of neutral here. It kind of helps because it's watery and that sort of thing. It's like another possibility of the shore he crosses contains this, you know? So that's really cool. So if you just sort of take that leap and go through the crisis that you need to go through, and this also involves like really rethinking your life's purpose and stuff, and perhaps starting completely over, right? There's gonna be abundance waiting for you. There's gonna be insane abundance waiting for you. So that's really quite cool and auspicious there. The tower is aspected by the Page of Swords. Again, this can be like skepticism and doubt that's creeping up on you and preventing you from, you know, just acknowledging the more profound effects of karma and the laws of the universe if they're followed appropriately. So some skepticism holding that back, perhaps. The star aspecting it, I think, is auspicious in general. The star is not afraid to let go, right? And the tower comes before the star. So the star is like influencing this area of life as kind of coming together, saying some part of you knows that things will be okay in a sense. And the more you kind of just allow yourself to be vulnerable and open and get rid of what's not serving you emotionally and mentally anymore, the more that you will be able to just like face what you perceive to be some sort of major crisis, right? Whether it actually is or not is another story, because it could just be in your mind. And the High Priestess is actually in some ways a fairly mental card. So it also, coupled with like this card here, the Page of Swords and the Knight of Swords and so on, it can be signifying like mental doubts and skepticism. The tower is also aspected by the Six of Pentacles. So again, I think that's just more auspiciousness to me. Like that's actually supportive in a way of dealing with whatever struggle you feel you're facing. It's just generally supportive. You know, the more you serve others, sixth house, the more this will cease to be such a scary thought, so to speak. And then the Nine of Wands. I didn't talk about what aspected him, but we've got the Six. We've got the Knight. And we got the Chariot. And really, the Chariot is the only one that really, I think, helps this along. It sort of like allows you to be more independent in your thinking and, really taking inventory of your actions and what's next. The Knight of Swords is like a nervousness that's encouraging you to rush. So there's no need to rush. Please don't let that spoil your contemplative attitude if you can. And this is kind of like the desire for, fame and friends, like how to win friends and influence people, that kind of bullshit. So I think that is actually kind of a negative thing. It's like, there's this juxtaposition of like really lasting fulfillment, even though it seems more difficult, versus like temporal fulfillment that's easier to acquire, but not going to really last or have a strong basis. And finally, I think we'll get to the Page of Swords again, the 12th house, and we've already talked about that a lot, the kind of doubts and sort of skeptical attitudes that are not very mature. This is like the primordial atheist in this situation, where it's like, oh, if there's a God, why does he let bad things happen? Like, these are the kinds of questions more immature thinkers will ask, in my opinion, or they will ask them and then use circular logic to just answer as like, there must be no God because, it's what it really is. It's like, I hate God because I believe he allows bad things to happen. So screw you, God. That's what it is. And I would say, a lot of atheists I've met have this kind of attitude. So these kinds of immature doubts or frame of references will be a cause of interference for you if you don't confront them. And the Knight of Swords aspecting is sort of like the mainstream kind of supporting that, in my opinion. Like, it's kind of like the average like atheist type person who watches some Bill Nye or something and Neil deGrasse Tyson. Those are these guys, right? And then like it reinforces their ideas about this stuff. And so they remain unhealthily skeptical. But the Page of Swords, too, in this position speaks of like forming premature conclusions about reality based on things that happen during childhood, like based on maybe like a feeling of resentment towards, abundance or people who had abundance or whatever. Or maybe, you were perceiving or felt like somebody was greedy. And so you form certain attitudes about it and that kind of a thing. The page is also aspected by the Six of Wands. So there's, again, like kind of a jealousy of maybe people who are popular and have power. Seventh house, right? It's other people. So it's very external. It's very much what the Chariot thinks he is going towards. So you're, on some level, you are trying to reach this, but you're also deeply skeptical about it, as you should be, because this is, in this situation, I just do not get a great vibe from this card. I really don't. And it's the 7th, or it's the 10th from the 10th, right? So it's like instability in the 10th, and then further fleeting instability and, just surface level crap in the 10th from the 10th. So that's not really supporting your career. It's premature actions and fleeting crap. And then finally, the page is aspected by the Tower. This is the part of you that is fighting against some kind of destruction, really fighting against some kind of crisis or perceived horror. This is if there's a God, why does he let bad things happen? Fuck God, there must not be a God. That's the attitude with that Tower. So the page is afraid of this Tower, and this so represents the part of you that's trying to skirt the issue of that Tower card. So this is a really powerful spread, I think, for you, Scorpio, and I think it's going to be a really interesting month. All right, well, that does it for this reading. Please hit like, subscribe, share this around. Check out my website for readings and material and content. Find me on Facebook and Instagram. And then, of course, remember to have a great month. Okay, good luck.